Welcome to Spooky Ass Shit. I am your congested host, Eric Dwinells. Yes, Spookaroos, still slightly under the weather, but hopefully you can just hear that it's just congestion in my nose and a little bit of it. Well, not a little bit. I've got a pretty hacking cough, but hopefully I can make it through the entire episode without having to pause to have a coughing break. I've been doing pretty good, so things are in good shape. I'm on my antibiotics, so that strep throat is going away. Feeling almost back to normal, so hopefully by next week I'll be free and clear. I feel like I've been getting sick a lot lately, and I've had to talk about it on the show a lot because it's always these little annoying colds and stuff that affect my voice. So I'm sorry about that, guys. I guess I gotta try to take better care of myself, huh? Tonight we are going to be talking about one of the most famous ghost stories in New England history. And like I said on the mini episode, which I hope you got a chance to listen to, the one I just put out on Monday night, that mini episode was a good setup because it's another kind of a small ghost story, but one I think you're going to enjoy nonetheless. And I do hope you checked out that mini episode. That was so kind and thoughtful of Jeff Bergeron, our spookaroo from the Great White North, Canada, who took it upon himself to record that story to share with us while I was not feeling so hot. And that way the show just had something to put out. And I really appreciate that. And I invite you all to do the same. In fact, I would love to make an episode, or even more than one episode, of you guys telling me your own hometown haunts. Now, hometown haunts, those are stories from your neck of the woods. It doesn't have to be your exact hometown. In fact, it doesn't have to be your hometown at all, but where you're from. A story where you're from. Whether that's your home country, your home county, your home state, whatever you want to call it. But the little stories that we wouldn't have heard a million times. You know, like I can talk about Lizzie Borden, but you can hear about Lizzie Borden a million other places. So, although I probably will talk about her someday. But, you know, it's nice to get these little stories that we might not hear otherwise. So you can go ahead and record yourself, or you can just shoot me an email at spookyasshit@gmail.com, or get in touch with me through Instagram or Facebook or however you want to do it. And we can try to work something out. Either you can submit in writing to me your story, or maybe we can even arrange a Skype interview or something like that, as I have done with Spookaroos in the past. And I'm so grateful for it. You guys have been great so far, and I hope that that kind of collaboration will continue. Now, I want to jump right into the story pretty much tonight because you guys have been waiting so patiently for a new episode. But I do want to mention that I have something very important to talk about show-wise at the end of the episode. So it's going to be slightly different than normal episode endings because I have a big, not announcement, but a big thing that I want to discuss with you guys. But I'm going to save it till the end so that if you're not interested in hearing about it, you can just turn it off when I say, okay, that's the end of the story of Lucy Keys, which is what we're talking about tonight. And then you're free to go if you want. But if you care about the show and you care about the future of the show and you want to have some thoughts and input into it, then stick around because you're going to want to hear the ending. Okay, Lucy Keys. Like I said, this is a very famous story here in Massachusetts, but it's also kind of a small story. So this might be a short episode as well. Not as short as the mini episode, but just bear with me, please. Lucy Keys. The story of Lucy Keys is one of the most famous and enduring legends of Massachusetts. It's also one of the saddest. Our story takes place in the 1750s. Robert Keys and his wife, Martha, purchased a 200-acre plot of forested land located on the slope of Wachusett Mountain. Now, folks, I want to interrupt while we're still early in the story. This story is set on Wachusett Mountain, and if you're from Massachusetts, I'm sure you'll know I have to get something out of my system before we continue, so please indulge me for 15 seconds. I had to. I absolutely had to. If you grew up in Massachusetts during the 80s, 90s, 2000s, whatever, I don't know how long they've been doing those commercials, but those commercials have been around a long time. And I don't know if that it's still the case, but it seemed like Wachusett Mountain Ski Area was family owned, and the family would be in the commercials. And I don't remember their names or anything like that, but there was this like cute, kind of elvish redhead woman that was always seemed so friendly and had a sweet voice, and like I said, kind of an elfish quality to her. And yeah, so I don't know if they still do those commercials. I haven't had TV in a long time. I cut the cord many years ago. But those commercials are classic, and I just can't say Wachusett Mountain without thinking of it. And now you guys will think of it too. Okay, back to our ghost story. The land was located in the town now known as Princeton, Massachusetts. But back in colonial days, Princeton was essentially located in kind of a wilderness frontier. Granted, life for many in the 18th century America was not easy, but if you were living on the frontier, existence was doubly tough. If you lived in a town or a city, at least there were neighbors around who could lend a hand when times got tough. In the wilderness, you were on your own. Robert and Martha's only help came in the form of their young children, Anne, Patty, and the infant, Lucy. The girls, especially the older two, would help around the house and even brave the wilderness to fetch much-needed supplies for the household. Although the Keys had settled into something of a routine in their new home, there were, perhaps, harbingers of the darkness to come lurking in the nearby woods. A tribe of Mohawk Native Americans were known to pass through the area, and, although they were never known to start trouble with the Keys, they were known to be rather unwelcoming to their new neighbors. There was another neighbor who made it clear that he did not want the Keys family around. His name was Tilly Littlejohn, and he claimed that the Keys had illegally settled on his land. The issue landed in court, and the judge sided with the Keys family, saying that although Littlejohn had been living on the land, he had had no legal right to do so. He was, in the court's opinion, a hermit. Littlejohn moved on further west on the mountain, and the Keys settled back into their home. And so the matter was settled. Or so it would seem. Life moved along, and soon about 4 years had passed since the Keys had moved into their frontier home. Their girls had grown. Anna was now 9, Patty 7, and Lucy was 4, and the year was 1755. As the girls grew older and became more capable and comfortable, more responsibility was given to them. They came to know the trails around their home like the back of their own hands. Robert and Martha taught them well, and trusted the older girls could take care of themselves. So it was on the morning of April 14th, 1755, when Martha asked Anne and Patty to go down to the beach of Lake Wachusett to gather a bucket of sand. The fine sand from the beach was used to scour the floors. The older girls agreed to go, but when young Lucy overheard, she asked if she could join her older sisters on the errand. Her mother said no. Lucy was still too little, and would be too difficult for Anna and Patty to carry a heavy bucket of sand and mind their little sister. The older girls headed off to the beach, and Martha returned to her housework. Lucy returned to her play. But she still wished that she could have gone down to the beach like her sisters. She knew her mother had said no, but adventure called, and Lucy couldn't resist. She snuck away from her mother and walked out the door, following the path to the beach that her sisters had taken moments before. Not long after, Anna and Patty returned from the beach. By this time, Martha had noticed that Lucy had gone missing. She knew her daughter well enough to know what had happened. She knew that Lucy had run off after her sisters. "Is Lucy with you?" Martha asked her eldest daughters. "No, we haven't seen her since we left." At this point, panic must have started to set in, and the search for Lucy began. On that first day, the Keys family searched high and low for their missing daughter, and they had some help from a seemingly unlikely source: their estranged neighbor, Tilly Littlejohn. Over the following weeks, volunteers poured in to help search for the missing girl. They even searched Lake Wachusett. After some time, it became clear that little Lucy was most likely not going to be found. At least, not alive anyway. Volunteers stopped showing up. But Robert and Martha Keyes would not give up hope that their daughter was still somehow alive and lost in the woods. According to some accounts, Robert drove himself into poverty, paying officials to continue the search for Lucy. Martha would go out into the woods each evening at dusk, calling out her daughter's name over and over again. Her calls would never be answered. Most assumed that the worst had happened. Lucy had run off after her sisters, but become disoriented and lost the trail. From there, most feared, she encountered Mohawks, who either killed her or kidnapped her. Native tribes were known to kidnap colonial children. However, this would be unusual unless the tribe was at war with the colonists. For the most part, the Mohawks stayed out of the various Indian wars that took place in the 17th and 18th century. Also, although the Mohawk tribe may have passed through the area from time to time, they were never known to live in central Massachusetts. Nonetheless, the Mohawks became the prime suspect in the disappearance of Lucy Keyes in the minds of many New Englanders. Perhaps surprisingly, there may even be some circumstantial evidence to support this theory. According to some, the Mohawks didn't kill Lucy when they found her wandering in the woods. They simply scooped her up and raised her as one of their own children. Many years later, 2 colonial travelers came across a white woman living among the tribe near the Canadian border. When the travelers attempted to speak to the white woman, they found that she could speak only very little English, though she was able to tell them that she had once lived near what she called Wachusett Hill. But that's just one theory of what happened to little Lucy. Another states that she was, in fact, murdered by her neighbor, Tilly Littlejohn. What evidence exists to support this claim? Well, if you believe reports, Littlejohn confessed the crime on his deathbed. Of course, the truth gets a little murky here. In researching the case, some reports state unequivocally that Littlejohn moved to New York sometime after Lucy's disappearance, where he lived out his life. On his deathbed, he either told his wife or wrote a letter in which he confessed that several years earlier he had found Lucy Keyes wandering in the woods. Still angry over the property dispute with her father, Littlejohn struck the child in the head with a rock. The girl was bleeding and began to cry. Littlejohn said he never intended to kill Lucy, but once she was bleeding and crying, he knew he couldn't let her live. He bashed her head with a rock and hid the child's body in a hollow log. He assisted in the search for Lucy only as a cover to make sure searchers didn't get too close to the girl's body. When the others had left the area to search a different area, he removed the body from the log and buried it under an overturned tree. But that's only what some reports say. Others are far less specific. These reports state that an old man in New York confessed to having murdered a child in Massachusetts. But that's it. Some speculate that this may have been Littlejohn confessing to murdering Lucy Keyes, but either way, to my knowledge, there is no evidence to support that any such confession actually happened. And that is where our story ends. Or is it? You see, I mentioned that this was a ghost story after all. Some say that Lucy and her mother, Martha, roam Mount Wachusett to this very day. Most ghostly encounters involve Martha, who hikers, skiers, and rangers have all claimed to hear crying and calling out her daughter's name, Lucy, Lucy. Other times, a phantom Lucy has been known to cross walking trails trying to find her way home, or perhaps follow the sound of her mother's voice. In an interview quoted in the book Weird Massachusetts, night shift snow groomer Jimmy Della Santa claims that he was out one evening grooming the snow after a late-night snowstorm. Quote, "It wasn't a very big storm. We got maybe 3 or 4 inches of snow. When I got up to the top of Challenger Trail, that's where I came upon the footprints. Had they been there earlier in the evening, say 11, 12 o'clock, there would have been an accumulation of snow in the footprints. But there was no accumulation. These were fresh tracks. Unexplained fresh tracks. I sat in my machine, kind of stunned, thinking, this is a little kid's footprints. What are they doing up here at this time of night? Mr. Delisanta doesn't mention if he attempted, or even thought, to seek help for a possible lost child during a New England snowstorm. A paranormal investigation group called New England Wicked Scary. Hey, that's a name almost as dumb as this show's. Anyway, New England Wicked Scary, they have performed a few investigations, and I say that in quotations, of course, in the Wachusett area, and they seem to report the same kind of BS that most paranormal investigators report. I love the account that they give to a local newspaper, The Landmark, though, about one of their early investigations. They didn't know for sure where the Keys were supposed to have lived, so they drove out to the approximate area and found an abandoned house. For reasons unknown, they decided this must be the place, and set up their ghost-catching equipment in the backyard. In short order, they picked up what they described as very clear EVPs, in which a woman's voice can be heard saying, "Help! Go! Go! Run!" Like all the best paranormal researchers before them, as soon as they thought they may have started to get actual evidence of spirit activity, they packed up and left. To give them some credit, they do say that they left not out of fear, but out of respect to the spirit of Martha Keys, who they felt did not want them there at her former home. But I say, if you're so worried about respect, they could have come up with a classier name for their group, for one thing. Anyway, the next day, these investigators talked to the park rangers about their experience at the old abandoned Keys place. The park rangers quickly pointed out that they were not actually at the Keys place. They were actually at a former ranger's home, which had been abandoned some years before. I find this amusing, and I'm surprised that they would admit as much, but on the other hand, Martha is supposed to be a wandering ghost, so it's theoretically possible that they still could have encountered her. It just means their whole thing about, like, oh, we felt like we were getting too close to home for Martha, so we had to leave. Well, that part kind of flies out the window, but anyway. A few days later, the group went and set up their ghost equipment at the actual site of the Keys' home. But they say nothing of note really occurred except for some anomalies in a few photographs. They talk about a spot of grass rustling when there was no wind. They're really into rustling leaves and grass. They mention that a bunch of times. And they say in some of their photos they have anomalies. They have faces, pareidolia, and they also say that there's spirit orbs and that kind of thing. Spirit orbs is that's such bullshit. But anyway, okay, paranormal investigators. God. They also visited Martha's grave. As soon as one of the investigators entered, she claims she felt a forceful push on her chest that caused her to fall and hit her head on a stone wall. She was not seriously injured, but there were many scratches left by the fall. She claims that these scratches disappeared as soon as she left the cemetery. Well, it would have been good to have some video evidence of that. Maybe they do. Maybe I just didn't see it. I was reading an article after all. Man, I don't know. I'll have to check and see if they have a website. If they do, of course, I'll post it on the Facebook page. They also talk a lot about the shaking leaves here in the cemetery, too. They mention a tree. They keep mentioning that there was no wind. Well, if you're outside, there's wind. But, okay, let's say there's no wind. And they say that there were just like 2 leaves on this tree that were frantically shaking, even though there was no wind. Now, I will admit that 2 leaves shaking on a tree when the rest of the tree is not shaking, that is unusual, okay. But there are perhaps some explanations. There could be a squirrel or something you don't see on the tree. Maybe something is vibrating on that particular branch. Who knows? Any number of explanations. But of course we have to jump right to, oh, that's the ghost of Martha Keys, and she's looking for her daughter by hanging out in trees. They took photos, and there's an orb by the tree. So that must be Martha Keyes. I don't know. I'm not impressed with these ghost investigators, especially when they give themselves a little cute name like that. But look, if you're out there having fun with your friends and you got to wrap it in a ghost story, there's worse ways to spend a weekend, I guess. Now, just to wrap it up in a nice, clear way, I want to separate fact from fiction here. It is definitely true that the Keyes family existed during this time frame. It is definitely true that they had a daughter that went missing. That's what makes the story so sad. That part is 100% true. What is unknown is what actually happened to Lucy. It's still an unsolved disappearance. And of course, any accusations they're related don't have any proof to them. And of course, the ghost stories themselves, unless you have experienced it firsthand, I suppose, and would swear to it, then they are unproven as well. So, but yes, the Keyes family did exist. Yes, they really did have a daughter that went missing. Yes, people really did come out to help search. Yes, Tilly Littlejohn really was a neighbor, and there really was a dispute over land. All that is true. Everything after that is speculation and local legend. So that's the story of Lucy Keyes. So now that you have some of the information, I wonder what you think. And I do hope you will tell me either through email or perhaps by checking out the Facebook page, which is facebook.com/spookyas. That is our open to the public. Anybody can write or comment or do anything they want within reason on that page. But if you really want to do a deep dive and get in with the true blue spookaroos, then you have to join our closed Facebook group. That is the Spookaroos. Why is it closed? Because that way we can talk about all these nasty little things and no one will judge us because we all understand each other. We all know that we like spooky ass shit and this is what we like to talk about, and we don't have to feel like a weirdo because we're all weirdos. We're all Spookaroos, and that's the point of that closed group. So you can join us there at facebook.com/spookaroos. Actually, I don't know if that's true, but I think that's true. Just go to Facebook and search Spookaroos. Don't join the one about children's clothes if that still exists. Just look for the creepy one. That's us. Of course, I invite you to check out the show's webpage, which is spookyas.com or spookyasshit.com. They both take you to the same place, and that is the show's blog page. From there, you can listen to each and every episode, even the ones that are no longer available on iTunes. We also have links to all of our social media, including Facebook, which I already mentioned, facebook.com/spookyas. And you can find us on Twitter, which I hardly ever use, and Instagram, which I use all the time. They are both at spookyasshit. And please, if you would, share the show. We need to grow our Spookaroos army, and it would be really nice to get more listeners. So if you know anyone that's into some spooky ass shit, send them this way. And of course, your continued support is always welcome via happy reviews left on Stitcher or iTunes or Apple Podcast or YouTube or wherever you happen to be listening from. I always appreciate it. It's very encouraging. And of course, I just like to hear from you guys. So don't be afraid to write me an email at spookyasshit@gmail.com. Now that is where I usually end the show. So if that's all you care about is the actual legend of Lucy Keyes and I've put in my plugs, then you are free to go. But if you want to be involved in the future of the show, if you want to be part of the discussion, then I want you to stick around because there is something we need to talk about. I have said for a long time that one of the biggest problems with this show is the name that I chose for it. I did not realize at the time that you could not include curse words in your Apple Podcast name because I, for a long time, listened to What the Fuck with Mark Maron. But of course, when you find it on iTunes, it's listed as WTF, not What the Fuck. So that's why this show is called Spooky Ass Shit, but I have to call it Spooky AS. Now, the problem with that is, what the fuck, WTF, people know what that means. Spooky AS, people don't know what that means. And this literally, like, when I named this show, it was a month before I heard AF as a thing, meaning as fuck. Because if I had known that, then the show would have been Spooky AF. And then people would know what that was supposed to mean. But Spooky AS, people don't know what that means. And then when I describe it, they're like, Spooky as? Or Spooky A.S? dot. And then I'm like, no, you have to type it in just spooky, then the letter A, then the letter S. So I think that is part of the problem with the show. People see it in iTunes or wherever you find it, and they're not quite sure what the AS stands for or what the show is going to be about. And with so much competition out there, why even bother giving it a try if the host can't get a name that fits the show? So what I am considering is changing the name of the show. I know, it's something I said I wouldn't do. I do like the name Spooky Ass Shit. That's how I talk. That's kind of my humor. It kind of lets you know we're not going to take things too seriously. So I still like that. But, maybe you don't want to wear that on a t-shirt either. Maybe there's some problems around the curse words in it. So I'm thinking of changing the show's name, and I do have a new name in mind, and I'm going to post it on the Spookaroos. Now, I would just mention it here, but I don't want to mention it and then someone takes it or buys the domain or, whatever. But I feel like I can trust the True Blue Spookaroos on the Facebook group. So I will mention it there and, I'll set up a poll and see how you guys feel about it. Would it be okay if I change the name of the show, or would it absolutely break your heart? Now, I'll take whatever you have to say into consideration, but of course the final decision will be up to me. Personally, I'd kind of don't want to change the name of the show. I've invested a lot of time and money into Spooky Ass Shit and Spooky AS, but on the other hand, I feel like it's not really taking us where we want to go. Not that I have some crazy big expectations for the show, but I would like a little bit more return for the investment in time and money that I put into it, and I think maybe changing the name of the show might help to do that. So please do let me know what you think on Facebook, via email, or through Instagram, however you guys want to get a hold of me, and let me know. And with all that said, sorry this was a little bit of a shorter episode. My voice held up pretty well, although there were a few times it kind of dipped out. I left it in so you could hear it. And trust me, I took out some ones that were way worse, but I think I held up pretty good. No coughing fits, so that's good. So, until next time, don't be afraid.